Okay, we should be live. And today we are going to have something special. Today we are going to have a guest here. And today we are going to discuss about 9max sit and goes. And this is a public private coaching for our member Neo1186. I'm Aarnimetsa from pokeramania.com. So, Neo, we haven't seen you in the forum for about half a year. And when when I'm looking at the buy-in levels right now, I think that we are seeing like you have increased your buy-ins since the last time. I think we did a last public private coaching and then you played 1.5s.
I think it was $3.50.
Might be. At least during the first public private coachings you did 1.5s, but now I can
Yeah,
see some 7s here already. Some turbos and some regular speeds.
Yep, and some hypers.
Yeah, there are some $3.5 hypers as well, so that's interesting to see. I think that we'll start off by one thing that Neo is probably the most Finnish grinder I have met in a while. Like Neo isn't Finnish, but his mindset seems to be quite Finnish at some times. So first of all, I'm thinking that like Neo has been worried about like how good is the level of game at the moment, and like this is something that you don't probably when you are playing you this doesn't feel nice. I think this is something like close to 100 buy-ins below EV since most of the games are from 3.5, so this is something like 70 to 80 buy-ins below EV. But still, when we start to calculate these EVs, we can start like there is the first 10 buy-ins one, then there's half a buy-in, 12 buy-ins, so 22 and a half. Then there is like this is probably close to 8, so about 30 buy-ins one, about 2 buy-ins down. So it's like 28 buy-ins out of 605 games. So if we are looking our ROI from just the buy-ins, this this sample that you sent me, we are close to 5%. And if we are thinking about that there is also some rakeback incoming, like if you are, we talked about this off stream a bit, and you are quite close to Platinum Star, which should be about 25% rakeback, which would add something like $70 here.
Mhm.
So I think like this is something that you can have a quite solid foundation starting from this, and I'm thinking that from 3.5s and 7s having about 5% EV ROI is, I think it's going to be good. So you shouldn't be as worried as you are.
Okay.
That's a very Finnish answer as well.
Well, the month was, I think, around 3.5 ROI.
Yeah, I think one problem with Hold'em Manager is that it's thinking the ROI the same way than Poker Tracker is calculating the ROI. So if you are running a bit bad at the $7 games, it's going to be, or if you are running bad at the higher buy-in games, the calculated ROIs can be quite deceiving in my opinion. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay.
And there is practically nothing you can do on Hold'em Manager to cure it. So that's also one part of the problem. And in general, when I start a coaching session or this kind of a sessions, generally I like to do a couple of different reports. So I have some reports where I can see, and I'm taking a look at on where we should see like the most discrepancies between what I think would be okay or would be good and what you are doing. And first of all, we can take a small look on every position. And Calleon says that filter by buy-in amount, problem solved. But if you are filtering by buy-in amount, then you don't get the. I don't think that then you can get. I don't think that then you can get, if you are filtering by buy-in amount, that you can get the whole picture. Then you can get only one side of the picture, or like then you can get only sevens, only 3.5s. And when I'm looking at these positions, I'm in general I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing. Like one point for thinking about these stats for thinking about these stats for a 9-max player is that when I'm looking at these stats and I'm seeing that you are playing about the same ranges from UTG to MP2, that's probably something to be a bit worried about. Like, I think that in general from UTG and from UTG plus one, I think that those are going to be spots that you should have a more defined, like, I think that in general you could be tighter early on compared to the later positions. But we can see in here that from the race first that you are increasing your aggression quite a bit when coming from UTG to small blind. And something like from button, I think that we can open even more than you are opening. And I think that's also one point, that it's going to be really good to open even more from button, because when we are playing from the button, then we can play in position, and playing in position in general is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
One good point also that I could see is that you are implementing limps from small blind, so you are playing a really wide range from the small blind and using all the opportunities given to you. And I think that your small blind, when you are losing just 7 big blinds per 100, I think that's in general that's exceptional. So that's something that you can pat yourself to the back about.
Okay, I do.
I can already hear the happiness. But I think that where we can have probably the most impact would be even opening even wider from the button, and there might be some interesting stuff going on from the UTG, because it's way higher than the UTG plus one. Might be that there have been just a lot of desperation shove spots. Actually, we could check it out on like effective stack size. That is it something real, or if we are excluding all the even if we are excluding all the positions where you have been less than 15 big blinds deep, so there shouldn't be any desperation shove spots. I'm still thinking that this looks quite weird. Of course, the sample size isn't that big, but playing about 4% more from UTG than UTG plus one, I think there is something funny going on.
Hmm. That's weird.
I think that's weird. I don't think that I have seen this before. and I don't pretty much understand the logic on why this happens and why this could be good or bad. Like I'd understand that when we are having a really short stack, we could have a higher percentage of hands played in UTG because that would be the spot that where we are doing most of our desperation shoves. Because then we know that for the next hand we need to get it all in anyway in the big blind, or lose our stack as a weapon. But in here, with 15 big blinds and higher, this is something really weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Perhaps we'll see about it a bit later on. Then something I usually want to also look about is that we are looking at different spots with regards of the stack size. So in here I can usually see if there is something, some spot that we'll need to focus more on. And Danita says that psychologically it maybe feels more pressing when blinds are approaching. Yeah, that may be. Do you feel more pressure on UTG than UTG plus one?
Uh, um, I would say no, but it might be unconscious. One problem could also be that when I play a lot of tables, that I maybe pay more attention when I'm in UTG than in UTG plus one. Sounds a bit weird, but could be that I just see the spot better.
That might also be that if you're paying more attention to UTG spots. I in general think that you should have a game plan for depending on how many people are remaining on the table. Actually, let's go back to the positions a bit. How many hands do we see? We see way more hands from UTG than UTG plus one. Let's see. Now I got a bit more interested about this because this doesn't make that much sense. If we are thinking about UTG should be position number 6 here. Because the button is 0 and position is related to the button counterclockwise. And 8 is always the small blind, big blind, and 9 is always the small blind. So when we would have 10 players, then UTG would be number 7. Okay. Now we are having only 770 hands here. Actually, that's something to... Let's say our position is 5, so there is like 4 guys and then there's the button, which should be always UTG plus 1. This is a head scratcher. Does anyone have an explanation on this? That why can we be UTG when we are on position 6, 5 and 4? And Callion says that early position ranges should be relatively static, so they tend to go more from muscle memory. Yeah, and I think that there shouldn't be that much difference between UTG and UTG plus 1 ranges. I think for most players I'd say they would be relatively similar. And this is something new.
Maybe Poker Tracker counts the shorter-handed situations where we are UTG basically when we are mid position, when there are only 6 players left.
Yeah, this is something interesting though. And there is something weird going on with this, for sure. And probably something that I'll need to look through later on. And hello to Wrecking Call, Doomaren1234 and Insanity on our Twitch chat as well. We can have still UTG from Hijack, which is interesting. And sorry about this, we'll take 10 minutes more at some point.
Okay, no problem.
So position 1 is always cutoff, and position 0 is always button. But like positions from 2 and higher can be pretty much anything. If someone has an idea why Poker Tracker works like this, I would be interested to hear an explanation. I haven't seen this happening before, or I haven't paid attention probably. But the filtering loses some of its value if we can be UTG when there are 5 people before us, 6 people before, or 3 people before us, or 2 people before us, because then UTG will have widely different values. So that's something that I think that there is not a lot of logic injected. But let's go to the effective stack sizes. So, and this was the wrong thing to do, to like group by the all-in adjusted big blinds. That's something that we are not interested in. But we are interested in the stack sizes. So, when we are looking at the effective stack sizes, in general, one thing to take note that when stack is less than 2 big blinds, it counts all the situations where also we are getting the blinds out of the big blind. Like everybody folds to us because Poker Tracker counts those situations as the effective stack size being exactly 0. But we can see that from 10 to 30 big blinds, I think that those are going to be spots that are quite important to think about. And I think that like we are having still a small sample size, but those might be spots that we'll need to pay a bit more attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And but I see like what I usually want to see when I'm looking at the effective stack size. Usually I want to see more aggression when the stack sizes are going down, especially from 5 to 2 big blinds, and I think this pretty well shows it. And also when we can see that there are a lot of players that are pretty much always either shoving or starting to like almost always shove when stacks are going to get smaller than 15 big blinds. I think that that's good that you are not like always shoving on these situations. But I think that there's still probably a lot more spots where opening small would be better than doing a shove.
Okay.
Like it's going to be about how do we what do we want our opponent to do, kind of things. And Danitas says that it's same for him, 13k hands UTG and 8k hands UTG plus 1 this month. I'll look into it and see what we can find out about that. And actually one thing from the positions. Sorry about this. This is like the numbers game, and this is something that in general isn't going to be it's going to be more involved later on, but this is just like going through the basic stuff with Neo first, and then going through some hands. And one thing that I also took note in from Big Blind, that we can see that Neo doesn't like folding to steals, especially doesn't like folding to steals with a small raise.
That's true.
And I think that these are going to be, there will be some hands that we are going to look today that are going to be about defending. And in general, I didn't think that defending wide is a good idea. And probably somewhere at your buying levels, it starts to be that there are more aggressive players and then you can defend a lot more. But I think that you might have gone a bit too far with defending your big blinds. And there's quite a lot of different discrepancy between defending your small blind and big blind. Like when it's a steal and your small blind is in jeopardy, you are folding the steal about 9 out of 10 times. But when it's your big blind, then it's like, you don't steal from me. And it's going to be, I think this is quite the big difference between a small blind and a big blind here. And strong fold, much appreciated. Thanks for comment. And Danita. Okay, here's an explanation that PT4 takes the position from description in the history. This is interesting to see. So in 5-handed games, UTG is the first one, and it's not going to be. Okay, that actually explains it a lot, and that also explains why Neo likely has the higher range from UTG than UTG plus 1. So not that much, or not that lot a need to worry there, I think.
Okay. About small blind, I just wanted to mention that I probably don't 3-bet enough when in small blind. That could be a leak.
I think that could be a leak, but that's actually something that will be also quite likely. And one thing that usually in sit and goes I see that many players having as a leak is that they are practically only defending their blinds by 3-betting. And I think that's a huge mistake, because in general you can't defend enough by 3-betting, because there will be opponents that are, and you will be risking way too much. So there will be a challenge on how to find the balance.
Okay.
And Caleon says that, yeah, not many regs in higher stakes have less than 60% big blind fold to steal. Well, some have, but player pool is likely to open more as well. And we can actually also look on it a bit with a bit of a different way. Like, let's say player position that there's the first raiser, and let's say the first raiser is from the small blind. And if the first raiser is from the small blind, then you are folding to a steal 42% of the time. And like in general, when first raiser comes from the small blind, calling a really wide range is, especially when the stacks are going to be deeper, it makes a lot of sense. And I would think that this is even on bit of a high side, like you could even defend more against the small blind raise.
Mhm.
But let's say that small blind isn't the one raising. So for steals, then it means that we are playing against button or cutoff. And on the other hand, when you are playing against button or cutoff raises with about 40% range, this is something that might bite you later on, especially against cutoff there, because the general cutoff ranges are going to be tighter than the range you are playing against them. So I think that we are going to look through some hands that are going to be quite interesting, because I'm going to say that when we are going to the almighty Hold'em resources calculator, you are probably going to see something that you have never seen in these public-private coachings. But actually, no, it's a good point on asking, do you have any questions rising up from this?
Uh, well, I now I'm intrigued what I screwed up. That HSE will show something that it never showed. But otherwise, I would just note that I heard and read that you don't need to win that often when you defend. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
like
need.
basically, when we are defending in the big blind, like the basic theory could be in these games that as long as we are losing less than 1.14 big blinds because of the blinds and antes, like as long as we are losing less than 114 big blinds per 100 for for calling in the big blind, like as long as we are doing that, we are doing better than if we would fold. But I think that when you are defending this widely against the cutoff and button raises, I think that you are including some hands that you are probably losing more than that, especially against general cutoffs.
Okay.
That's basically my point here. But let's go to Hold'em resources calculator, because this is probably something that I did this a bit previous or before we started our session, so we don't need to wait for the grind with Hold'em resources calculator. But this is like when I chewed all of Neo's hands here, and this looks pretty interesting, right? So in here we are having a lot of hands in Hold'em resources calculator, and we are having really high equity differences. And this is because when we are looking through hands with quick analyze, it's always going to think about that in the hand. Like if we are looking at this queen jack off, it would always look at the hand like the first guy would have shoved, the second guy would have called a shove, and you would be calling a shove as well. But when we are looking at the hand histories here, we can see that something else is going on. That like these hands are not going to be about shoves and calls. But why am I still including these is because when I look through a few of these hand histories, I still think that like Hold'em resources calculator rises up some quite interesting hands this way. And this queen jack off is actually, it's not even, I don't think that this is that big of a mistake. I still think that this is probably going to be a bit too wide as a call in a vacuum. Like if we are thinking about that button has opened, small blind has already called. In general, like, and the problem is mainly because of our stack size here. When we are having only 9 big blinds, and we need to be really careful in this pot. Like, we can't be playing really aggressively in this pot. because it will be a catastrophe if we are going to get it all in against either or these guys. So it will be quite easy for them to bet us out of the pot. So in general, because there is a caller already, I think that this is going to be a hand that it's going to be slightly minus EV to be calling, even though this is a hand that flops okay. And something like Queen Jack suited probably would be a plus EV call here.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if we fold this, I think that there will be certain amount of probabilities that these two guys will get it all in, and that will be really good for our equity. But I don't think that in this kind of a three-way pot we can get enough equity out of our hand, even though we get great pot odds.
Would any information on the players change anything about that? Like if the small blind is a fishy guy who calls too much?
If the small blind is a fishy play, like this is in a way, this is interesting because I find that there will be, I think there will be really few opportunities for this to be a like if the small blind is a tight player, you are going to get crushed by his range that he defends his small blind here. And on the other hand, if the small blind is a fish, then we'll also need to be probably even more careful because then we are getting more collision equity when the button is going to collide with the small blind.
Mm-hmm.
And like when Calleon says that versus button alone, we could not usually just fold and flatting would make sense. Yep, I agree. But it's nastier with small blind as his range tends to be strong, unless he's fishy. But like as I said, it's a double-edged sword. Like it's going to be quite likely that his range is going to be strong. But on the other hand, if he's fishy and his range will be weaker, those fishy players also find out more ways to get eliminated on the flop or post flop. So like a fishy player, you'll get more collision equity, and against the tighter player, you are getting crushed by his range. So this is kind of a lose-lose situation, I think.
Okay.
And we are having a bit of a similar situation, or this is a bit of a similar situation. That's also, I think, that is going to be quite interesting in a way that we can see in here that there is the cutoff that's the biggest stack, and he raises, and there's one really short stack. We are getting dealt 4-7 suited. Why would we want to defend our big blind here?
Because he will probably be loose and min raise right range, and our hand is okay. We also don't risk much because we are still way ahead of the short stack. So it's an opportunity to get some equity out of probably a bad player.
This is also that I don't know the player, but a hand as weak as 4-7 suited, and the stack size is so short as they are, I think that this is also going to be a situation that it's going to be really hard to turn this into a plus EV spot, all in all. Because also, even though we don't risk that much by the act of calling, like it doesn't matter that much if after this hand we are having 11.3 or 10.3. But the problem is like when we get to post flop, do we want to bluff this pot out? If we start bluffing this pot out, we'll need to like dish out at least a 2 big blind bet. Or if we go for a check raise, then we are in a situation that if the check raise goes bad, then we are either out of the game or we are going to be the smallest stack here. And that's basically with, as what Calleon says, that the main problem is the stack depth. So there are like two problems. First of all, the stack depth, and second problem would be the ICM pressure here. And it's not like our opponent would need to be a reg and know about ICM pressure here. I think that this is a spot where even random players would inflict pressure quite often when they are having the largest stack and they are going to be close to the bubble. I think that even random players are more apt to carry on. But this is mainly like, this is one of the weakest hands we can hold. We can't flop practically anything strong with this kind of a hand. And our stack size is going to be really low, and we don't have a lot of creativity in here because of the smallest stack. And even if our opponent doesn't understand ICM pressure, it's also like we are in a way, we are handcuffed by our stack size, because then we know, because we are going to know about our own stack size, that we don't have as much space to do creative stuff against the opponent.
Okay, I agree.
And this is something that, if I'm thinking about, let's open this as a basic hand so we can play a bit with the ranges. I'm thinking that this is a spot that, like, even if our opponent is opening pretty widely against us, and this isn't something that you should think about hold'em resources here, but when I'm thinking about what kind of a hands could we call here with, I'm thinking that we can call with pretty much everything solid suited here. I think these are going to be really fine calls. We don't want to be calling with smaller pocket pairs than nines, because I think that actually probably smaller pocket pairs than tens or jacks, because I think that these pocket pairs are going to be hands that are going to be way better as shoves. I think something like this would be what I would defend in this kind of a spot. What I think that we could defend in this spot. And like 4-7 suited is going to be quite far away from what I think that would be.
What about mid-suited connectors like 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited?
The problem with the mid-suited connectors is that we are going to flop, when we are going to flop value, we are going to mainly flop something like, we are going to flop a mid pair most of the time. And the problem with when we are with the mid-suited connectors is that they are going to get a lot more value the deeper your stack is, and a lot less value the less we are having the less space we are having to move. With something like Jack-10 suited, we are going to flop like top pair way more often than something like 8-7 suited. So we are going to have sizably more good, decent flops there. But if we would have something like 25 big blinds here effectively against our opponent, then we could, first of all, we could defend more, because then we would have more opportunities to play the pot to ourselves post flop, and also then there would be hands that would increase in value, like 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited. But those kind of hands are hands that they love getting more. They love getting more or deeper stacks, and even here might be that some hands would be better as shoves. So, but at least the smallest pocket pair should, or towards the pocket pairs, because we can also inflict pressure on our opponent. Probably we could fold something like fold pocket force and smaller or something. But I don't think that we can play as wide as you did play in that spot.
Okay.
That's just an explanation on why I think that it's the defending has gone a bit too far, and what are my reasons and why, or like how do I approach a certain kind of situation, and like that's also a situation that it might, like our range probably doubles or triples even if we are thinking about the same spot where we are having double the chips, because then we are having a lot more opportunity to play the pot. But in that kind, and then it makes more sense also for us to take part in the pot. But also, like, even if we are having 25 big blinds here, so we are risking even less of our stack, I'd still think that 7-4 suited is going to be too weak. And this is going to be also a bit of an interesting spot. First of all, we are having Colin Moshman as our opponent here. That's something that I didn't expect seeing from your hands. But so we'll see in here. We are holding ace-9 off. We are seeing Colin Moshman min raise. There's a button that I don't recall the name, so likely the button is a random. Calling. What should our play be here?
Well, I think either. I mean, with a hand like that, I think 3-bet could be an option. Or a fold, I guess.
Why?
I think the call here was a mistake. Because the hand is just. It doesn't flop very well, it's easy to be dominated. And yeah, it's not a very good hand. I mean, it could be a okay 3-bet.
And there is also a cube that says that Boschman always creates an image of a 45 years old heavy metal headbanger to my mind. Now I can't, like, I know what Colin Moshman looks like, but now I can't get the image out of my head. Oh no. But I think in this case, like ace-9 is not a hand that would flop very well. But I think that when Colin Moshman opens from the cutoff, we are ahead of his range here. And in this case, this is something, or this is like conceptually something to understand here. I think that this is a very good spot to be 3-bet shoving. Because first of all, there is like a random player that increases our fold equity a ton here. Like if we are looking at this situation, we are risking only 18 big blinds, but Colin Moshman in this spot is having 36 big blinds, and the button is having 51 big blinds. So this is a one spot where we can use our opponent's stack sizes to our advantage. Like in this case, it's going to be advantage for us to have a lower stack size here, because we can use this guy's stack as a lever and like make the first opener fold a lot of the time, because effectively he's risking all of his stack size, even though you are only having half his stack size. And we are way ahead of cutoff's range, and we are even more ahead of the button's range. So this is a reason why I think that this hand is also important. Like seeing this kind of a situations where you can use other players' stack sizes to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So the point in here wasn't that much about calling here, and it's like I think that probably by defending here, like if we are ahead of these both of these guys' ranges, we are making money by doing this call. I just think that we are making a lot more money by 3-bet shoving this. And actually, when we see that our opponent bets more than the pot or bets exactly the pot on the flop, that isn't going to be that. It's quite drawy, but I still think when opponent is betting the whole pot with these effective stack size, I think that it's quite likely that he's not a reg. Let's see. I don't think that we are actually going to have a lot of problems here. I think this is very well played. Like we are defending, then our opponent carries on. This is something that we could also, if we are thinking about it, like this is one of those flops that we can also do something to exploit the general tendency of opponents doing a lot of this, that they are raising, then they are betting, and but this is a spot where again when there is a smaller stack it lessens our opportunities. But if it would be that we would be a smaller stack here, like click backing here would make it pretty hard for our opponent to carry on, and we wouldn't risk that high amount of our own stack size. But this is something that I believe that we are making money when we are defending, or we are losing less than about one big blind. Okay, this is a kind of a similar situation, that button raises, small blind calls, Neo calls from the big blind. Okay, this time around we are having a bit weaker hand, like we are having Jack 9 off. Small blind seems to be a reg, so when small blind calls, I think that I remember that nickname somewhere, so it's likely that he's a reg. So what do you think about calling this pre-flop?
I mean, I probably just thought that the hand flops good and the price is okay to just see a flop. But with the reg just calling, it might not be so good. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if reg is calling this, this is going to be a bit more icky. But this time we are having a lot higher stack size here, so I think this is actually better spot to call than the queen jack off. And this is more like what makes it interesting is what happens on the flop. Flop is 9 of clubs, 7 of clubs, 8 of hearts. So we are flopping the top pair and gutshot straight draw. The small blind checks to us. What should we do?
Well, we could bet out to protect our hand, and also as a semi-bluff, or we could check.
Okay. Which option would you think would be better?
I think betting out could be better. Yeah.
I actually think in here that checking is better than what you have done. And the reason is that there is not a lot of cards that we would actually completely hate in this spot. And then we would have against our opponents, I think that we are going to get it in against our opponents with a better, it's a better opportunity to get more value out of our opponents. And like all the tens, all the jacks, they are not horrible cards. But then the button bets a pot-sized bet. What shall we do? And small blind folds. So, like small blind's reg that should have the widest range or the tightest range. He folds. So we don't need to be worried about the tight range small blind. What should we do here?
Well, I guess a fold could be a mistake here, because we just have a lot of equity here.
I think that folding is going to be a mistake here because there are going to be so many hands that we are going to have so good equity, and there are going to be like players when they are having an opportunity to c-bet, they are likely c-betting a bit too much. And also in this case, there are so many hands that our opponent can bet as a semi-bluff. Like there are the club draws, there are tens, and we are having good equity against almost anything.
Mhm.
And Calleon says that the flop is a bit nasty versus pot-sized bet if a button is decent. Yeah, it's slightly nasty. Like we don't want to see a pot-sized bet. But when we are defending, it's a bit like if we are folding a top pair and a gut shot against a button that does a pretty standard bet line, like why are we defending something like Jack 9 then? Because this is one of the flops that we are getting the best equity. And like small blind is probably the opponent that we should be most worried about. Like what does he defend with here? And this is a spot where I think that probably check calling this and then probably check calling turn would be the best line by far. And I think that we are folding way too much equity on the flop here.
Okay.
And Calleon said on the 8-6 offhand, on this ace-5 ace, or ace-5 ace, 5 ace-5 flop, so there it's a paired board, that flat calling this or floating this would be best. And actually, that's a very good point, because if we float this and our opponent checks the turn, it's almost guaranteed that we can steal the pot by betting from position at that point.
Mhm.
Like very often when an opponent stops down betting on the turn after a c-bet, they are very often they are going to be folding on the turn. Like way too often. And of course, we could also turn some equity. If we are hitting a 6 or an 8, it might also be that we don't want to increase the pot size any further. And also if we are hitting a 7 there, then we are going to get more equity because we are getting an open-ender there. So there will be also good options for us. The
Okay.
nasty spot is that we are risking quite a bit because we are having quite a nasty ICM situation here. But thanks for Calleon on pointing this out as well. And I think that also clickbacking is something that opponents in these kind of situations where they know that they are going to be in with the bluff too often and stacks are upward to do anything is something that you can save chips with. On a Jack 9 off, Calleon is also disagreeing with me a bit on like if we are check. I would actually prefer check shoving flop with Jack 9 with the stack we have. And also like one additional point in checking the flop is also that if we are if it happens that we check and then a draw comes through, or there is queen or ace or king on the turn, and it goes just check through, it's not a horrible situation for us as if the pot size is smaller. And actually check shoving this if we get bet is going to be good as well, I think. But I think the most important thing is to be not folding on this flop.
Okay.
And that's like my main point. I don't know if Calleon agrees with me. Like, I agree that there are like, otherwise Villain can play pretty well. This is usually the situation when we are playing out of position that Villain can play pretty well, and that's one of the reasons why playing in position is awesome. It's pretty much the inverse of the previous hand, where because we are in position, we can do stuff like float the flop with a pretty wide range, because then we can use our position to our advantage later on. This is pretty interesting as well. We are dealt pocket sixes, cutoff raises, small blind with the biggest stack calls. We have pocket sixes. What do we do on the big blind?
Well, I would say we shove, but it can also depend a bit on reads. Like if the cutoff is very tight, for example.
That's actually a good point. If cutoff is really tight, what should we do then?
Well, we could defend.
With pocket sixes. I think that if cutoff is really tight, then folding becomes better. But I'm finding it really hard that with 13 big blinds, I'm finding really hard to find situations where flat calling with pocket sixes would be the best option. And this is also a spot that if we want to re-raise this, we probably don't want to shove this. We probably want to leave some chips behind.
Okay, yeah, non-all-in shove. Yeah.
But this is something that it's just like, it's really hard for me to think about a situation where I would like to call in this spot with pocket sixes. Like if opponents are really loose, then it's a situation that we mainly want to be raising here and seeing 5 cards and making one of our opponents fold. And if it's like, if our opponents are like cutoff is tight and small blind is tight, so their ranges are going to be way too strong for us, then we likely want to fold. I don't think that we can get enough equity by calling. Here. It's again, if you would have something like 17 or 18 big blinds, I think that calling could be an option. Then of course, then we are also having more weapon power with our stack as well, so. But then we would just have like way more opportunities to just go with a set mine here, when we don't have that much to pay and the pot will also always be at least 3-way. But I think that even though these equity differences, these are going to be quite huge, and I think there are just like, we don't see huge mistakes here by any means. But I think we can see a lot of spots where we could do things a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically our theme today. That, first of all, for your self-confidence, you are not majorly screwing up anything. And that's a good thing. But then it means also that on our coaching we are going to focus on things that we can do a little better.
Okay.
And Calleon says that if we have a read that cutoff is inducing about always, could set mine be profitable? Yes, set mining could be profitable in this case if cutoff would be always about always inducing. Like that they would be going for broke always on the flop. I'd still prefer that we are having a bit more chips. Like in here with 13.5 big blinds, we are going to have two things going for us. Like we are closing the action, so if we call here, we are guaranteed to see the flop and can set mine. And also that there is at least the other guy with a big stack. So there are two guys that we can get a stack out of. But the problem is that when we are hitting our set once in eight and a half times, then when we are just like we are left with 12.5 big blinds and we are having a lot of ICM implications here, even when we are risking the small part of our stack, I think that it's going to be quite close that can set mining be profitable, even if we think that cutoff is always going for broke. And even if cutoff is like slightly, like even if he's inducing with something like ace king, if he's inducing with something like that, he's not going for broke on any flop. So I'd like us to have a bit more safety caution. And I think, like, as I said, my first instinct with this hand, if we would have about 18 big blinds effectively, I think that this would be a good spot to set mine even against the cutoff that we think is inducing. I just think that our stack size is going to be too low when we are considering also the ICM in this spot. We looked at the king jack off already. This is, what is this? UGG plus one raises, small blind calls. We are in the big blind with queen 9 off. I don't like this because generally UTG plus one's range is going to be fairly tight, and also small blind's range is going to usually be fairly tight. This is one of those spots that, like, if these both guys are fishy, it might be okay, or it's probably okay, but if at least one of these guys is in his senses, I think that queen 9 off is going to be too wide of a defend. And like one of these guys could be in its senses if it's like cutoff and small blind or button and small blind against big blind. But when one guy is from UTG and one guy is from small blind, then I think that it's going to be.
Yeah, I probably didn't see that it is a hyper, so that could have been a mistake that I thought I was deeper.
Yeah, that's something to think about always, that you should be thinking about your own stack size. And if you are having a lot of problems with that you are not looking at the effective stack size, but you are looking at how big the blinds are. I think that's something that could help you. Like, we are having a session lord, our partner. They are having a tool that can convert all the stack sizes on the board to big blinds automatically. So then you could only see that there is like one big blind as a big blind, and you would see on hyper that everybody's having 25 big blind stack at the start and not the chips. I generally don't like it myself because I'd like to be in control and in manipulating the pot in a way that I know that my opponents are usually going to see the pot. But for you, for mixing turbos, normal speeds, and hypers, that could be really useful for not doing these kind of mistakes.
The bad news is that I have a tool like that, but I still miss these things sometimes when there's a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, that's going to be a problem. Then,
Yeah.
like as Danita says, that I always put hypers in a separate stack from other games. That's also going to be a good idea because, like, even though hypers are practically the same game with the effective stack sizes, they are going to play a bit different, especially when you are looking at just the stack sizes. So you might make some mistakes if you are playing hypers. And I think that, like, if we are deeper here, if this would be one of the first hands, like 50 plus 30 at normal speed or turbo, this could be okay-ish. I'd actually still think queen 9 off. No, it wouldn't be okay. Like queen 9 off. The problem is that we are not going to hit solid enough, and we are a mile behind a sensible UTG's range or small blinds range, calling UTG. And like only case that this is good is when both of these guys are out of their mind.
Also, it was a min raise. Does it change?
It is a min raise and it doesn't change that much. The problem is that how much behind we are with queen 9 off. Like, there are going to be very few flops that we can play really aggressively with queen 9 off. But if this would be suited, I wouldn't hate it. Even if it would be like queen 8 suited, I wouldn't hate it. Because then there would be so many more flops that we can play aggressively with. Like if we are flopping flush draw or straight draw, we are going to know more about where we stand. But if we are flopping a queen or a 9 in a situation where it's going to be quite likely that that a large part of our opponent's range is going to be dominating us even if we hit, we need to be playing quite carefully in these situations. Like, I think this is a point where the pot odds are looking a lot more enticing than the real situation is.
Okay.
And this is spot that it's going to be hard to hate it, I think. And this is like pre-flop. Even though our hand is not among the best with this sort of a stack size, it's going to be okay, especially when we are in position. Then we are flopping a straight draw. Okay, we are flopping a straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. Our opponent that raised pre-flop checks to us. What should we do?
I mean, I think I should have bet out probably when he checks to me, because there's a chance that we can take it down, and if not, then we have the initiative, and we can still improve our hand.
We can still improve our hand, and like if we are betting half a pot here or something like that, I think that we can still go for broke. We are going to have enough equity for for sure with two overcards, and with two overcards, backdoor flush draw and open ender, we are going to have. I think we are going to have so many options in winning the pot that we can bet out and we can check. I don't think that either one is a mistake. So these aren't trick questions. If you have done something, it might still be okay, and I think that checking the flop is okay. Okay. On
Okay.
the turn comes a 6. Our
Yeah.
opponent bets out 300. What shall we do?
Well, I mean, the board doesn't look great, and we get a bit. I can't even say that we get more equity, but I think we can't fold. So I think I would call and then evaluate the river.
I think that this is one of those spots that I'm thinking that if you are always just calling, I think these spots are going to be like, it's going to be really hard for your opponent to have a better hand here, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because there shouldn't be many trees. Okay, there can be something like 7-8, but like it's 7-8s are going to be pretty rare on your opponent's range. But I think most of the trees that our opponent would have, I think that he would have bet out on the flop already. So I think we should be fairly satisfied with our pair of sixes here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that it's really likely that we are having a better hand. Okay. Then comes the river. 9 of clubs. Our opponent bets out 300. What shall we do?
And the bet is pretty small, and the 9 is a card that he can bet, so I think we can't fold to these odds.
I don't think that we can fold, and the question is, I think in this case, that can we bet on the turn or on the river? Like, can we get more value because the opponent is betting such a small amount into the pot? And if we see here, our opponent had pretty much the immortal nuts, like 4 or 5 off, which is something that I didn't expect here. And our opponent tried to keep us in the pot, so it's likely that our opponent is quite fishy in this hand. But this is something that I think was quite interesting in that what are you thinking in these spots? And it's good to at least hear that you are not thinking about folding here. But with those small bet size, it's also I think in spots this is going to be a hand that we would prefer growing the pot with. But it's not like the best spot also.
Yeah, I mean,
Although,
if this wouldn't be on the bubble, I think I would play this much more aggressively. I think I was tighter because of the bubble.
okay, queen 4. This is a hand that I haven't seen before. This is probably a queen 4 suited against UTG +1. That's the second largest stack. This is one of those spots that do we have enough stack depth in here to be calling with the hand as weak as queen 4 suited when we are close to the bubble. And on the flop, I like your check call. I don't think that we can fold in here. And on the turn, I think I would still be check calling. And if I wouldn't hit on the river, like if our opponent would have bet twice and wouldn't hit on the river, then I would probably checkpot on the river. But on the river, when we hit trips, I think that it's going to be a spot where we could bet sizably more. Like that's 1/3 of the pot there or something, less than that.
Yeah, I made a small bet.
Why so small?
I thought when he makes a C bet and then checks the turn that he doesn't have much. So I could get maybe some calls of crappy hands, like maybe an 8 or some stuff that doesn't believe us, something like that. So I don't think he has much
I don't
value
think
there.
that I don't think that there should be, like, I don't think that you should be that believable here. So I would think that betting bigger here would make a lot of sense on the river. Like going at least half a pot rather than less than third a pot here would make a lot of sense. And it's something like the general vibe that I'm getting with these situations, that you are going to be like, this is going to also be probably an interesting hand, that we are the two smallest stacks here. Our opponent raises. This is going to be a good spot to call pre-flop. On the flop, we are hitting the top pair here. Practically, there are going to be straight draws, and on the other hand, if our opponent hits a straight draw, then it's usually going to give us at least a redraw or two pair. And if we are thinking then on the turn, the pot is going to be around 1,000 chips there. The board is going to be really dry. Why we are betting less than third of pot here? And like, that's also one point of what Caleon made. Like, I think like bet sizing on this kind of a wet board would, I think it would make sense, or it doesn't make that much sense to bet really small here.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. I have no idea why I bet the turn at all. I think I should have, or I would have checked this normally.
Yeah, and like check calling would make a lot of sense here, since we are still having a lot of showdown equity and there are a lot of river cards that can improve our equity a lot here.
Yep.
And then on the river, you check your opponent bets again like third of the pot. Why do you fold here?
I guess because the board looks very coordinated and his bet sizing looks like so much like value that I didn't think I have enough there to call second.
I think the problem in here is that we need to call 600 to fight for a pot of 3,000 or something like that. I think it's a spot where it's like we need to be right only about 1 in 4. Like if you would just look at chips, it's 1 in 5. But this is a spot where we need to be right only like 1 in 4. I think that we are going to get bluffed quite a few times here. And I also think that our opponent could do a weird value bet with a 10 here, with a weaker 10 here as well, or a 9. So, and there are plenty of also busted draws, so I think that folding here, especially against our worst opponent on the table, is going to be quite. And Calleon says that pretty thin for villain to bet top pair for value. Of course, something like 8-9 is reasonable. Flop top pair or better is quite unlikely. I think the problem is here that like I don't think that there is so much in villain's range that he would get here that he would bet here as well, like eights, but like how many eights would be also betting the flop. So like I think at least some eights will be betting the flop, and on the river there should be plenty other cards than eights that you would beat, and as I said, that you don't need to be right so often. And I think these are like, I don't think that there are huge mistakes here, but I think that there are like stuff that we could do a bit better. Then I
Okay.
also looked at some unopened hands, and there is something that I'd like to discuss. I'm trying to keep this quick, so we can take something like a break in something like 7 minutes or something.
Okay.
But we are having 3.3 big blinds. Okay, we are at the bottom. We are getting dealt 9-8 suited, which is an okay hand. Why do we raise for 3 big blinds?
Because I thought we still have some fold equity with 3 big blinds. Like he could, or he should fold some percent of his range still. I mean, if we min raise here, it could be that we have less fold equity than if we make a non-all-in shove.
I think that this is a spot where you are having markedly more fold equity if you min raise than if you raise it to 3x. And this is something to, like, if you are raising it to 3x here, you are pretty much telling your opponents that something is going wrong here. Like, if there would be a big stack raising here, the raise size should be either a shove or a min raise. Like a min raise would be something that opponents would expect even from a bigger stack. 3x raise, not the top, and usually that makes people think. When people think they are going to be folding more often, they are going to be folding less often, because when they think about the situation, they see that you are not having a large stack here, and it will be really easy for the big blind to call. So
but then do you make the min raise also with 4 blinds? I mean, where is the edge? I think I don't know exactly where the edge is to go from non-all-in shove to min raise.
And this is something that now Callion says that I think against regs you have more fold equity, whereas fish min raise might get more action. But the interesting side with min raise versus fish is that they can still fold flop versus small bet. That's also a spot where we can get additional fold equity. And that's also one point. And also, if we min raise here, small blind shoves, big blind calls, we are getting left with a bigger stack after that. Actually, let's do something interesting here. Let's go for, how much did we have there? About 3.5 big blinds.
Mhm.
Let's say that the stack depth have been effectively, let's say three to four. Let's see how many hands do we have. 330. That should be plenty. Let's go to all players. And let's compare, and I have made statistics for how often does an opponent fold to a small raise and how often does an opponent fold to an open shove. And I'm taking everything that's at least 80% of the 80 or 85% of the whole stack as an open shove. So like you're almost, or going for the next full big blind is going to the open shove side of it. And we can see that min raises are getting like 24% more fold equity here than open shoves, or like going for with more than 80% of your chips. We could actually even remove your stats here. You are folding a ton more against the min raise. So this might also prove that regs are going to fold way more often to a min raise than an open shove. So let's add another filter. Player is hero and not player is hero, like how often our opponents are. And we are having about exactly the same, like how often our opponents are folding to a min raise. There's about 24% difference. And this is something that I'm not surprised about. This is like Neo's hands that he has sent me. So this is something that I think that we can conclude from data. And I have seen this from my own stats. I have seen this from multiple other sources, that min raising is going to be way better than going for almost an all-in or going all-in this kind of a spot. We are going to have way more fold equity, even if it doesn't make sense. But if we min raise, we are like having more pre-flop fold equity. We are giving ourselves opportunity to have flop fold equity, and we are also giving ourselves an opportunity to have a better stack size if we need to raise fold this hand. Because this is the bubble, and in 9-max sit and goes, the bubble is going to be quite strong.
And at what stack size do you change from a min raise to non all-in shove?
Never. Like, I don't understand non all-in shoves. I think that it's non-optimal with any stack size.
Like if
Like
I
there's
shove,
like every time there is going to be, almost every time, either a min raise or a shove or a real shove would be better.
but if I shove like king 10 off from button on the bubble, and it's like the bottom of Nash, but it's still okay. Doesn't it make sense to?
Like the problem isn't that both options, like in this case, non all-in shove is going to be better than a shove, but a min raise will be better than a non all-in raise that we are raising to 3 big blinds here. But if we would have something like 8 big blinds here, let's say,
Yeah.
then it would be quite likely that a shove would be better here, and the min raise would be worse. And it's not like, and then if we are going for something like 7.5 big blinds there, like I don't think that there would be that much difference between a shove and that. I just don't see the point.
But if in this case we would have more and both opponents would cover us. So we would shove for 8 blinds and both opponents would cover us. Would it then not make sense to make a non-all-in shove instead of a min
I
raise
think if
or a normal
if
shove?
both opponents would cover us, then it would revert back to a situation where min raise would make more sense. Even though then we are likely sacrificing some of our fold equity, but then if we are comparing min raising to raising something like 7.5 big blinds, it's going to be so much better when our opponents are both going all in and we'll need to fold. So but in general, I think that there will be very few spots where non all in would make sense. And Danita says, what if it's a situation where players might flat a lot versus a min raise, but we don't want to shove? I still think that then we are just going to get, like against those opponents that would flat a lot against the min raise, then we would get such a sweet opportunities to get the pot on the flop by another bet there. So I don't know. Perhaps someone will tell me that I'm thinking about this wrong, but I haven't found any yet. I don't think I have found any good explanation on thinking about or going for almost all in, but not completely. And like the problem for me in there is that usually in these spots it's always going to be either better to min raise or either going to be better to shove. So and there's like Callan says that personally like I use a style to raise, for example, 3 or 4 big blinds, and I think that that's going to be better than going for almost all in. Like if we need to fold against the bigger stack, then but then it's also like if we are going to 3 to 4 big blinds, why aren't we min raising? But this is something that this is a spot where I think players in general are going to play non-optimally, and we can use it to our advantage a lot. And this is going to be like another spot, even though there is another player already all in. I still think that this is a spot where a min raise would make more sense than shoving, because then we would increase our fold equity, lessen the amount of chips that we are risking.
But we are now not folding, right?
No, we are not folding.
But we increase our fold equity by min raising.
Yes.
Okay,
Even when it
because we
doesn't
don't
make
want
sense.
to get called so often. Okay.
Like this is a spot where I think that this is about we can hide our stack size in here a bit better. Like it's going to be easier. Like when you are multi-tabling, if you are going to like you are playing, let's say 20 tables, ding, 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 you are going to get another table, another table, another table. Like if you are getting all the 3 buttons there, like tick, 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 it's going to be that this is going to be a standard situation and I'll need to think about that I'm playing against a larger stack. But on those situations when there are only 2 buttons, you'll know that, oh, there's a small stack all in already. So I have only an option to fold or call the small stacks all in. and then your brain goes to the mode that you are going to find out like what's the best way to play against a short stack here.
Mm-hmm.
And for Kaleon and Danita, I'd like to see it refuted by data that it would be better in those spots to use another sizing than min raise. And if you can see that like there will be top regs that are defending way more against a small race, I think that that would also be a quite a good. But I think that it's better that you, in general, you are using the smaller race, and this is actually one of those spots that you should use a small race rather than a shove, I think. And there is at least one hand that I noticed here. It was 10-8 suited, I think. Yeah. And this is something to also think about. Like when we are looking at this hand, like 10-8 suited, we are on a cutoff, we are having 10 big blinds. Seems to be a quite standard shove, right?
Well, it could be a min raise as well.
This is not a shove or a min raise spot when we are having 10 big blinds still. But in this case, this looks like a standard shove spot, but this isn't. Because small blind is having such a short stack here. And this is a spot that I wanted to take here, like adjusting your ranges towards situations. Like in this kind of situation when there are a really short stack behind you that's really likely to call, then going for a more high card oriented range will make a lot of sense. Like something like even King 6 suited would make more sense than 10-8, or like pretty much any ace would make more sense here than 10-8 suited. Normally 10-8 suited is a great hand to shove from farther behind, because even if your opponents are having, generally there are going to be like 3 ranges that are going to be fairly tight behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Like 10-8 suited is going to play well because it gets dominated really rarely, and there are going to be a lot of ways for the 10-8 suited to win. But the problem comes if there is one player that's almost always going to call. Because when you are against one big or one wide range, then against the wide range, the hands with big cards are going to get way more wins. And there is a comment on our chat on "Hello Neo, I have played you a lot. Are you worried already that now when we have talked about your game so much that you are going to see players that know you all the time?"
Well, I hope not.
Actually, like I think I have played, it was yesterday or day before that, I think that I played in a game that there was like at least 4 players from our forum. I think that's quite insane. And it was still a good game. So that's probably the most insane thing, that there are 4 players. I think everybody from our forum that was in the game was really good. So, but there were still enough players that weren't. And yeah, that's a really good spot. A really good spot from Kaleon. That one of the interesting side effects, that because of the small blind that is supposed to call really wide, makes the small pocket pairs also. They are having the same treatment as 10-8 suited here. like pocket fours and smaller. Like in general, if we are having 10 big blinds, we would be pretty much instantly shoving like any pocket pair in this situation. But when we are having a really short stack that will call with a really wide range, uh, uh, uh,
A question about this spot. Did you look at this with quick analyze or with FGS?
even if
Because-
I'm looking at this with FGS, it shouldn't change things a lot.
Yeah, I think 10-8 you did. I remember that mistake, but FGS makes sometimes the calling ranges tighter, I think.
It's going to be, actually now we can see that Huawei's calling range is likely going to be, but I still think that in real life, I think that we are getting called at least that often, and 10-8 suited is not going to be. And as we can see, still hands with big cards are going to be good here. And Kaleon says that 4 players from our forum and game was great. Yeah, it wasn't 6 max. If it would be 6 max and there would be 5 good players from our forum, then the game would probably suck, and then I just need to think about that. Why is everybody in this game? So actually that's a top tip. If you are playing 6 max and there are 3 nicknames already that you recognize from our forum, don't go into that game. It's probably not good for you. But I think that there was probably something like 1 reg outside of our forum that was in the game, like 4 regs from our forum and then one other reg, and I think two players that I love to play against and 2 randoms. Okay. This has now gone on longer than I thought, because we'll still have a... This is an interesting coaching as well, because Neo sent me like 2 A4s full of questions, so I think that we are going to take a break now, because there have been a ton of stuff today, I think.
Okay.
So let's take a 5-minute break and let's come back here 10 to 11 my time, so 10 to 10 your time, I think.
Okay.
So 5-minute break. We'll be back.